back to another episode of the Yellowhammer Sports Podcast. I am your host, CJ Duncan, and man, do we have a special one for you today. We want to thank you all for always tuning in week by week. I know some folks across the state had a week off. They were able to relax and watch other teams play, but we had another team, another set of fans that kind of had to sit in their sorrows for a week. So we'll jump into that at some point. But this particular episode is going to be more of us getting deeper in the weeds about what we're seeing, what's to come, and what we believe both teams need to do going forward to have productive seasons. And so before we jump in, our guest here today, Michael Brauner. Michael has spent some time with us here on the podcast before. You all may remember him from last season. But he is finally back with us. He is the Yellowhammer News senior sports analyst. He is also live on the air every weekday morning from 6 to 9 a.m. on the opening kickoff on WNSP FM 105.5. Michael, thank you so much for being with us this week.
Absolutely, CJ. Thanks for having me, man. You've been killing it, so I'm excited to talk a little ball with you again.
Well, I appreciate you being here, man, and it's always a pleasure to talk ball with you, man. I know we're kind of like football nerds in a sense. We love to talk about a lot of the analytics. We like to talk about the history of both of these teams, and so it's another exciting year. A lot of things going on, a lot of drama. So let's start off with the boys down on the plains. Entering to the season, I think we all kind of assumed with 5 straight home games that we would see at least a 4-1 start, if not 5-0. I mean, you have an Auburn team who was very busy over the offseason in the portal with the high school recruiting. And it's also the second year with Coach Hugh Freeze. So you expect to see some progress. You expect to see them take that jump in the second year. But that's not necessarily what's going on right now. The Auburn Tigers are 2-2 going into playing Oklahoma for their final home game in this 5-game stretch. What's going on with the Auburn Tigers?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that those 5 straight home games started because I think I wrote over the summer like why Auburn has to start at least 4-0. I didn't necessarily put it on them to beat Oklahoma. Weirdly, I do think they're going to beat Oklahoma this week. We can get into that a little bit later. But no, it's really, really, really ugly. I think everyone, all of us, Nick Saban included, drank the Kool-Aid on Auburn this year, thinking, Saban said on the first game day they're going to be one of the most improved teams in the SEC, and they're just not. They're worse, a lot worse, which is a shame too because I think last year, obviously the quarterback play wasn't good. We knew that, but it got skewed. The offensive line play wasn't great, and they just didn't have a dynamic playmaker at any position. Rivaldo Fairweather had a good season at the tight end position, but other than that, there just wasn't a difference-making guy, and it's a shame because one, Keandre Lambert-Smith, the transfer from Penn State, been absolutely phenomenal.
Excellent.
Like
Excellent.
I hate that gets overshadowed by the fact that they're 2-2 and have 2 really bad losses. But even in the 2 bad losses, he has been phenomenal. Obviously, bringing Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Malcolm Simmons as well, and you kind of hope that things are going to be a lot improved, and they are. Granted, Cam Coleman hasn't burst onto the scene right away, but I said this all offseason. It's hard for a freshman to come in right away and do that. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about Ryan Williams at some point in the show, but that's not the rule. That's very much the exception. And so, yeah, Cam Coleman's had some drops that have led to interceptions, but really, I mean, 2 big things are wrong. They can't quit turning the ball over, and they can't defend anyone. I mean, especially in the secondary, they can't cover anyone. So that's generally not going to be a recipe for football success.
I think you're exactly right, and we've talked about it over and over again. It is just so hard, and going back to the freshman receiver here, Coleman. It is so hard to come in as a freshman and play the receiver position, and for them to kind of put all their eggs in one basket or to lean on him so heavily to begin this season. Or to go into the season thinking that this is a part of their blueprint to win, it's just not sustainable. What Auburn has to get across to themselves, really, and to their fan bases, they should be a run-first team. They have an excellent running back in Jarquez Hunter, and they need to feed him the ball. There shouldn't be games where I only see 12 touches from Jarquez Hunter. It should be primarily Jarquez Hunter, and then the quarterback gets 15, 18 attempts a game. That's where they should be. He's the way that they're going to open up the pass game. If he runs the ball well, like he normally does, then that's when you get people to come into the box, you get the safeties to play down, and then you can hit your athletes on the outside. But if you try to do it the other way around, that's when you find yourself getting in trouble because there's just not enough talent at the quarterback position to throw you to wins. It's just not there. Whether they like it or not, the program does not have that right this second. And I know a lot of people like to talk about the offense right now, and it's very obvious the offense is not playing well. But I think you also mentioned the defense. I think the defense has to step up. There is way too much talent. There's way too much speed, way too much athleticism on that defense for them to be falling behind, for them to be giving up as many yards as they do. I know you mentioned the DBs, but also, I mean, Arkansas was just gashing them in the run game. I think that there's just a lack of discipline altogether on the entire team, but specifically the defense. I sit there and watch the games and I see no gap integrity. I see guys, flowing extremely hard. And that's why you see the RPO and all those type of things, the zone reads, they're working because they're flowing so hard and not, being accountable for what their jobs are, that you're seeing guys coming out the back end. You're seeing large plays with guys getting untouched before it's 8, 10 yards down the field. So I think it's an accumulation of things. As a team, they've got to get back to the basics: blocking, tackling, eye discipline. All those things have to come back into play. Because if you're turning the ball over and if you're having a ton of penalties on third down, you're not helping your quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, you can have the best defense in the country and 10 turnovers in 2 games. It's just not going to get it done, and you're not going to win a lot of football games like that. But I think you bring up a good point with they should be probably throwing it less. And, a lot of people have gone after Hugh Freeze, and Hugh Freeze has made I don't really have an issue with him. I think a lot of people said, oh, he's throwing his quarterbacks under the bus. Well, his quarterbacks aren't playing well enough. I don't have an issue with Hugh Freeze saying that, we got to not turn the ball over and we got to find a guy who won't turn the ball over. But I do have an issue with the fact that he kind of chose to go into the season with these guys. Granted, I don't think they're necessarily a quarterback away because of some of the issues you just brought up on defense, and not to mention the offensive line is probably below average at best, would be putting it kindly. So, I mean, I don't think they were a quarterback away. I don't blame Hugh Freeze for not going out and spending $5-10 million, whatever the number is, in the portal in NIL on a quarterback. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, you can throw these guys under the bus, coach, and I don't really have a problem with it because they'd be the first to tell you their play isn't good enough. But at the same time, you kind of made your bed here, and now you're sleeping in it, and now you want to complain about the fact that, oh, we're turning the ball over at a high rate. Well, maybe you should have brought in a quarterback who's not going to, or coach them better to not turn the ball over. And granted, again, I think the throwing under the bus was taken a little bit out of context. He did say probably 30 seconds into the press conference, we need to coach these guys better. We're not doing good enough of a job. But then he'll say things along the lines of, yeah, I didn't think any of the calls were bad. He said there was one play call the whole game that it wasn't. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? You turned the ball over 5 times. What do you mean none of the play calls were bad? How could that be possible? How is the offense not the greatest offense of all time if every play call was great? So I don't know. It's a weird situation. I wrote this week that it feels like the beginning of the end, which is maybe a little bit dramatic sounding. I don't mean he's going to get fired this year, but if things continue on the current track for a year, like next year, he will enter the year on the hot seat, which is obviously not the case this year. And bad football teams don't just get not bad during the season for the most part. They're going to be bad, and they're going to lose some bad games for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I don't want to blame guys underperforming on Hugh Freeze. That once you're in between the lines, it's up to you as a man, as a player, to perform at your highest level. You know what I mean? But what I will put on Hugh Freeze, to me, is the lack of discipline and the bad habits that are going on at Auburn. You either coach that or you accept that. They've had a full summer and they've had a full camp. And if you think that they entered this first game, the second game, third or fourth game, and that was the first time they ever jumped off sides, or the first time that these quarterbacks have thrown picks into wrong coverages, they're not reading coverage as they're walking to the line of scrimmage. If you think that's the first time that that happened, then you're out of your mind. But I think this tends to happen, though, a lot, Michael, when you see these coaches who are, so-called offensive gurus or quarterback gurus, and they spend a lot of their time on the offensive side of the ball. Usually something else is going to sacrifice. The defense is going to sacrifice, or maybe just the structure and the culture of the team is going to sacrifice. I think some of the best teams that have ever been assembled, and even now, you see where the best teams, they have a coach that is a CEO. They're controlling the culture. They're controlling every step. They have a finger on everything that's going on within that program. But then you also have two good coordinators who are able to be very specific and able to really cut their teeth on what needs to go on Saturday. But if you got your head coach trying to do one of those things, something else is going to lack. And I think Auburn is dealing with a coach who I think is very talented and knows what he's doing, but maybe, he's too focused on one thing and the other things are just not living up to expectations.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and that's just the reality of Auburn right now. And you can hope things turn around this year. I don't think they're turning around this year. Obviously, the quarterback play just isn't good enough. That's the primary concern and always going to be the biggest thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty well sums it up on Auburn.
Well, okay, so now you look at Oklahoma coming into town, and lucky for Auburn, Oklahoma's dealing with quarterback issues as well. Now, Oklahoma flies around on defense. They play a very, very physical brand of football. Brent Venables is an excellent coach. Auburn's got a week to try to figure out some of these problems. Do they figure it out? What do you think is going to happen on Saturday?
Yeah, ironically, Jackson Arnold being benched against Tennessee is probably the worst thing that could have happened to Auburn in terms of them having trouble with running quarterbacks. And, Michael Hawkins coming in now as a three-star true freshman playing in his first road game in the SEC. So maybe that's a factor, and there are nerves that play in there, but obviously he moves a bit better than Arnold. Arnold's so disappointing. He was this five-star, highly touted guy for Oklahoma that really they pushed Dylan Gabriel out and said, hey, go to Oregon or go wherever you're going to go because we got Jackson Arnold and he's going to be our starting quarterback this year. Man, oh man, what a miss. I don't know what's going on with that, but I mean, it's not good when you bet to bench your sophomore five-star quarterback, and this was supposed to be his team and his year, and now you're going with a true freshman three-star. So, I mean, that's kind of one of the biggest disappointments of the year. I think that Hawkins is probably going to have a pretty good game against Auburn because every quarterback, especially running quarterbacks, have been having good games. But I would love to see Oklahoma kind of get him into the flow of things early, run some, maybe even a QB draw up the middle on the first drive just to get him into the flow of things. And because this is a kid who was in high school football last year, wasn't this highly touted prospect. It's 3 starts, nothing to turn your nose up about, but this is not an easy place to play, even when the team is bad. And it's funny, like weirdly, I feel like Auburn's going to win. That's kind of just how this sport works. Backs against the wall. Really, how Auburn works is they'll find a way to win a game where they have no business winning. And so, the spread is only about 2. I really do actually like Auburn in this spot and think they have a good chance to win with no other explanation than that's just kind of how college football works.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that Auburn's season is on the line, and the direction of this program is on the line this weekend. I think if a loss this weekend sends them in the wrong direction, and then you will have a lot of people with their jobs on the line, whether that's the quarterback, whether that's the coach, the OC, the defense coordinator. People's jobs are on the line this weekend. There's just a certain expectation down in Auburn, whether it's warranted or not. That's just how it works down at Auburn. But, although things aren't looking great in the win-loss column, when you watch them play, there are a lot of positives. There are guys that are making plays. There are guys who will play at the NFL level at some point. If they could just get it to click at some point, it'll be okay. And I want to call out the defense. If the defense steps up for Auburn this week, and those quarterbacks don't have to play from behind, right? Playing from behind is just so tough, because you're having to throw the ball more often than you'd like to. You're having to play it a little bit faster than you'd like to. Hey, let these guys be comfortable for once this season,
Yeah.
and let's see where it goes. So, all right, Auburn's year is on the line, but now you've got Alabama coming in this weekend, where they could end up being the favorites to win a national championship after this weekend. So another chapter against the University of Georgia. What do you think? You are our resident Alabama expert. Are you nervous? Are you anxious? Are you confident? What are we feeling about this weekend?
Yeah, I'm pretty incredibly nervous. But it's fun. It's fun. I mean, obviously, I make no bones about it. I want Alabama to win, and I don't hide that. But there's certainly less of a feeling. I don't know if you feel it too. Maybe it's because the games are on ABC now, and there's no CBS theme music. This game doesn't feel. Obviously, it's a big game. I'm not minimizing it, but it kind of doesn't feel as big as it's felt when Alabama and Georgia have met up in the regular season in the past. And I think that's 99% due to playoff expansion and just the fact that it's not a one game season. You're not done if you lose this game. Granted, it gives you less wiggle room because I don't think anyone less than 10-2 probably makes the playoff this year. So you'd really, especially if you're Georgia, you still got to go to Texas and to Ole Miss. Alabama's still got to go to Tennessee and to LSU. So really, you want to win this game. Of course, I'm not saying that, but there's definitely a little bit less of an intensity in terms of at least how I'm feeling. Like, and if Alabama loses, it's not the end of the world, where it always has been the end of the world if they lose a regular season game. All that being said, yeah, I'm pretty nervous. I think the biggest mismatch in favor of Georgia is the fact that Carson Beck is an experienced quarterback who's one of the best in the country, if not the best, against going up against a really young Alabama secondary that is playing a lot of true freshmen in it. Xavier Brown. Damani Jackson's a transfer as well. I mean, Devontae Smith has been in the program. Devontae Smith, yes, it's funny to say that, but he's been in the program for a while. But you're starting a couple of true freshmen, and Red Morgan's been playing a bunch of time. Zay Mincy, all these freshman guys who are playing major minutes and haven't been tested really at all yet. Western Kentucky wasn't a test. South Florida, they got beat a lot, and the quarterback couldn't, and Byron Brown couldn't hit them deep. And then, Tyler Van Dyke obviously gets hurt on the first drive for Wisconsin, which would have been at least somewhat of a test. So they really haven't been tested at all. I think it's probably going to be a little bit leaky in the secondary. If that's just how it is, man. You're a young corner starting in an SEC game and an Alabama Georgia game. I understand, like they haven't messed up too badly yet, but I'm not going to be surprised if Beck kind of. And it also goes in the fact that Georgia doesn't have the Brock Bowers and the Ladd McConkeys of the world. They still got some dang good players in that group of weapons. So I think that's the most interesting matchup is Georgia's pass game against Alabama's secondary. And we'll see if the freshmen are up to the task.
You know what? It's funny you say that. I have this right in my notes as well, where I say, hey, look, the front seven has performed at an excellent, they've done extremely well this year at an excellent rate. And I said, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the secondary. And this is a game where someone like Keon Sabb has to come alive. Maybe a turnover late that motivates the rest of the secondary, that allows them to play with a little bit more confidence, allows them to play a little bit more free. I think somebody like him has to step up as an older guy to say, hey, guys, we're going to be okay. And I just hope Alabama doesn't fall asleep seeing the Kentucky score, right? Georgia, Kentucky, low scoring game. They barely get out of Lexington. And sometimes that can be a trap. You can be like, oh, Georgia's not that good on offense. But, that's what gets you beat right there. You still have to prepare for this team as if Carson Beck could potentially be the number one pick in the draft. That is how you have to look at it. I think Nick Saban likes to call it rat poison. None of that this week. So what are some key things that you think need to happen for Alabama to win this game? I know you just mentioned the secondary playing well, but maybe offensively, what needs to happen? What do we need to see maybe out of Milroe or the offensive line now that Caden Proctor's back?
Yeah, first things first, Alabama's got to be able to run the ball in this game. I think a lot of people when DeBoer was hired saw what he did with Michael Penix last year and thought like, oh, Jalen Milroe is going to be Michael Penix. He isn't, and that's fine. Jalen Milroe is what he is. I think that Milroe, a lot of people hoped he would take a bigger step as a passer than he has. And great, he's still great. Hitting the deep ball's open. He's going to hit him, and he's not afraid to throw it down the field. He's never going to be elite as an intermediate passer. He's just not. It's not his game, and it's not this offense's game. I'm sure DeBoer would probably have a deeper bag of tricks if he was able to be that guy who's, hitting guys 15 yards over the middle and towards the side, but he's just not. That's not his game. And at a certain point, Jalen Milroe is what he is. He hasn't improved a ton, I don't think, from last year. Saturday will be a good test, but I think he kind of still sometimes has a tendency to hold on to the ball a little bit long, still struggles to read a defense a little bit, and still struggles with intermediate accuracy. Granted, for all those flaws, Alabama's proven they can win with that, and they can beat Georgia with that. They proved it last year in the SEC championship, and they were, a ticky-tack play or two away from really would have been winning a national championship, because the winner of the Alabama-Michigan game would have handled Washington fairly easily. So it's not that you can't win with it. You can. It's just he's going to have those same issues, and he'll always have them. I think Ryan Williams needs to make a play in this one. This is a 17-year-old kid going up against grown men in the secondary. Again, he's been going up against grown men, but this is really the first actual test. I mean, we thought Wisconsin would present some sort of challenge. They didn't. Georgia's defensive backs if they can take Ryan Williams out of the game, I think it will go a long way for Georgia. At the same time, we haven't seen a ton of Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, Jeremy Bernard. Jeremy Bernard was good against Wisconsin, but we haven't seen a ton from the big plays have come from Ryan Williams for the most part, in large part. So I think Georgia's going to look to take him away. So who else steps up at wide receiver when Alabama has to throw the ball? We know Alabama wants to run the ball. There's a good chance you fall down 14-0 early in the first quarter. What do you do then? I mean, who's going to step up at wide receiver? Is Jalen Milroe going to be able to beat Georgia enough with his arm to make that happen? So there's a lot of factors that go into this. I think getting a lead early would like you brought up about Auburn, would certainly go a long way.
For sure. And I think in these big games, extended drives, even if you don't score a touchdown, even a field goal, extended drives helps you out so much, right? Yeah. It keeps your defense off the field, keeps those guys nice and healthy, and they've got their win, they've got all those type of things, and it gives your offense confidence. Hey, we're good. We're driving the ball. The offensive line is getting a rhythm. The running back is getting a rhythm. That's what you want to see. And I think, to your point, on those 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8s, that's where Alabama has to be great on Saturday. And unfortunately, that's not Milroe's wheelhouse, right? That's not what he's best at. So I think you got to.
It gets dicey in obvious passing situations.
It really does, and that's where I think you got to bring in somebody like Kendrick Law, right? Where we haven't seen him be used the way he probably should be thus far, and maybe I'm hoping DeBoer was just waiting on this game to pull out his bag for Kendrick Law, because you've got to do some jet sweeps, right? You got to do some screens, you got to do some quick hitting routes out of the slot. Get him involved, allow him to get the ball in his hands and go get you a few more yards, a few more yak yards. That is what you need on those 3rd down situations. But if you think that, against Georgia, against Coach Kirby Smart, that, you can run, and then just chunk it deep, I don't know if that's a winning formula this year. I don't know that. But Coach DeBoer has won a lot in his career, and this is not his first rodeo. I'm sure he's got something up his sleeve. But there's a lot of athletes in that receiving core and in the running back room for Alabama that can really go get this thing done. I don't think they should be very Milroe focused. They shouldn't just wear him down and run him in the dirt. You've got guys that can do it. He could even be a decoy for half the game for all I care. Him putting that ball in somebody's stomach and then he's giving it, but he's running to your left. I mean, you're going to see Georgia guys chasing after him after that Wisconsin game the way he ran. So keep that in mind as you're watching the game as well.
Yeah, I'm glad
Um,
you brought up the sustained drives too. So I
mhm.
think Alabama leads the country in touchdowns and 20 plus yards, but they really haven't had these long 7, 8 minute drives. That credit to them because they did it in the SEC championship with largely the same offense for the most part, a lot of the same pieces. But we haven't seen it this year. There haven't been those. It's been 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 60-yard touchdown, 3 and out. All right, maybe a 25-yard play and then a 20-yard touchdown. It's just kind of how it's worked. And I don't know that that's sustainable against a team like Georgia. You're going to have some long, sustained drives. To this point, we haven't seen it. They're going to have some on Saturday to win.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I look at this game, I know, and I feel the same thing you're feeling. With the current 12 playoff system, it's like, okay, win, lose, or draw, Alabama and Georgia are probably still going to make the playoff. It feels like a two-loss SEC ball club will probably still get in that 12-team playoff. But I think personally that this is a huge, huge game, and I look at it like this. For the rest of the year, trying to have momentum. It's such a momentum game, having confidence, knowing that you still have Tennessee at Neyland and you have LSU at Death Valley. To me, if you lose this game, it makes those games a lot harder. And you don't want to have to try to rally the troops and do all that. You want guys feeling good, having the momentum, and feeling good about their play and what they can do on the road coming up. What do you think about those games coming up in Neyland at Death Valley for Alabama and their confidence after leaving this Georgia game?
Yeah, I think they're going to lose at Neyland Stadium. I've been saying that since the offseason. Honestly, Tennessee has been they've been decent on offense. I think they could have done more against Oklahoma. I think Josh Heupel knew that. I think he called the dogs off a little bit against Oklahoma, which props to him because if that was my old school, I would have been I would have been put the foot on the gas after what they did to him. But all that being said, yeah, Tennessee, I think, might have the best defense in the country, which is incredible to say, but it's right up there. And that has not been the case. I don't think this game, I thought for a while that it would look a lot like it did in Neyland Stadium 2 years ago with Bryce Young and Hendon Hooker, scoring a million touchdowns plus. And I don't think it's going to be like that at all. I think Alabama's going to have a ton of trouble scoring points on that defense, and I think Nico is just going to be too much for the. And Heupel go again against a young secondary. I think they're going to lose it at Neyland Stadium. We'll see what happens. It's also I reserve my right to change that opinion depending on what the Tide looked like this week and the next couple of weeks before
Well,
that.
and that's why I say this game is such a big game, right?
Yeah,
It's like, if you look at it on paper, it may seem as if, Tennessee has a real shot at beating Alabama this year, but football is all about, who's peaking at the right time,
sure.
who has it all together at the right time. And so if Alabama were to beat Georgia, although having a very young team, if those young players start to feel good about themselves, who's to say that they won't shock us all? You
Yeah,
know,
it's a good point. It's certainly a setup for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and LSU's not the team that we we thought they would be coming
That
into the
game I am less
season.
concerned about. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel that way, but I will say, as a former SEC guy, man, any given Saturday, it's just tough to win games, and especially if they're on the road. And if that game ends up being a night game and a couple calls go LSU's way, I can see that being a dogfight in the fourth quarter. That's just how the SEC works. Trust me,
Sure.
Georgia didn't go to Lexington thinking it was going to be a close game. They ended up in a dogfight. So yeah, you got to respect every opponent. And I'll give a shout out to my Vanderbilt Commodores. I promise you, number 7 Missouri did not think they'd be in a dogfight in double overtime.
They looked
That's
good,
just
man. They looked good. I'm
yeah.
sure you were thrilled.
Yeah, I was yelling at my TV. I thought I was going to will us to a win, but the program's heading in the right direction. But one last thing before I let you get out of here, Michael. So in Austin, Texas, we have a new starting quarterback, and of course, due to injury, and so we don't know what's to come next. How long Quinn Ewers will be out? But what are your thoughts on Arch Manning having the job as we speak. Is that a good thing for Texas opponents, or is that a bad thing? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think Texas has two elite starting quarterbacks on their roster. I think Arch Manning would start at 95%. Arch Manning might be better than Quinn Ewers, but Quinn Ewers is the guy with the experience and, took him to the playoff last year and has him. By the way, I think Texas is the best team in the country with or without Quinn Ewers, with Arch Manning in or with Quinn Ewers in. I don't think it really matters. I think either way, they're the best team in the country to what we've seen so far. And Texas really doesn't get tested until the Georgia game, and really not after that either. But all that being said, yeah, I mean, I think Arch is really good. I think Ewers is really good too. Ewers kind of never developed into what we thought he was going to be. As he's one of the Manning too, but Ewers is one of the highest rated quarterback prospects ever coming out of high
And you
school.
remember he reclassified as well to get to college earlier for NIL at Ohio State, all that stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, he was supposed to be far and away the best quarterback in the country the moment he stepped on the field. That might be an unfair thing to say, but that some people certainly expected that. And I think Quinn Ewers is a really good college football player. Not a whole lot more than that, though. I think Arch Manning long term is ultimately the better prospect. We'll see who's the better quarterback for Texas right now. I don't think Quinn Ewers should lose his job after a couple of good performances from Arch against UTSA and ULM and ultimately Mississippi State probably as well. Which I mean that's
Oh,
an ugly situation and
yeah, it is.
but we don't even need to get into that. I think everyone knows Toledo did it to him. But anyway, all that being said, yeah, I mean, they have the bye after Mississippi State, and then they play Oklahoma. So I would think Ewers is going to be back by that point. It's like an oblique issue, which is a weird injury that not a lot of people know
It's
anything about.
usually a baseball injury, right?
Yeah,
You don't see that happen very often in football.
especially to a
But yeah,
quarterback.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, well, Michael, I appreciate your time, man. This has been awesome. We've got to do this again soon. I know I can always count on you to really talk some good football with me. Feel free to come back at any point. I want to thank our listeners again for tuning in before the big weekend. Please follow us on all social platforms. That's where you'll be able to get all the updates on all future Yellowhammer Sports content. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Appreciate you having me, CJ. Thank you.
Of course.